Hello, friends, compatriots, rivals, and all, to another episode of the JoyPad podcast. My name is Tom. Tonight I am joined by Mr. Michael Fleming and Megan, and we will be missing Mr. Pinto as he had to run away at the last minute. Not like a coward, he was running off valiantly to help a family member in need. So we will miss you, sir, but we endure. I am going to be the topic master du jour, so I'm going to pass it off to Megan. What are you consuming in terms of liquids? How are you doing, and what games are you playing this fine day?
Oh boy. I am enjoying some nice Snapple to keep up with my theme of tea. Always tea. Nothing but tea ever, always.
There was one time you didn't, and it was very disappointing.
But I talked about my deep, dark secret of loving BTS. Anyway, as to not revisit that, I'm doing okay. It's a lovely thump day. It's pretty cool outside today, which I am enjoying. I have my windows open, which is nice. As for what I'm playing, I decided to jump into Metro Exodus. I've seen a lot of stories online about how it's a great example of an open world game. Didn't get super far into it. I got it for free as part of a bundle of games a while back and just never played it. Super pretty, but I don't know how I feel about it. It's like an action adventure shooter, which is fine. But everybody talks way too much, and I'm just not a fan. Every time you think an NPC is done explaining something to you, it's like, but wait, there's more, and let me just drone on and on and on like I'm doing right now. So
Is it too much exposition, when they talk,
yeah,
kind of thing?
it's like one guy in your crew is talking about how he's going to set up shop to customize weapons and fix them, and how you need to keep your guns oiled, and he's great at repairs, and the secret to repairs, you gotta keep your guns oiled, and it's just excessive and redundant, and I hate it. It drives me crazy because I don't want to miss anything, but I also don't want to sit there and just listen to them talk about nothing.
Hey, all I hear is that there's a man that's very excited about lubing up barrels,
Exactly.
and he just wants you to know how good he is.
At lubing those barrels. That's not something I should have said. Anyway, that's all I've been really playing this week. I'm thinking about jumping into Fallout 76. I don't know why. I want to see how the DLC content has improved the game. Yeah, I don't know.
If it's
I'll
any good, I
probably
have
quit
it
after
still.
a day or two, but we'll see. We might be surprised. That's about it for me. Mr. Fleming, or should I call you Michael this evening? Since you were the one and
Ooh.
only this evening. How are
I
you?
am.
Last Mike standing.
What are you drinking, and what have you been playing?
I am doing well. It was my birthday week 2 days ago from the time of recording, a week and 2 days ago from the time that we post it. It was good. I had a good time with my birthday. Actually got a wonderful present, which I don't think we'll have video this week due to Pinto being out. But it is a Secret Lab chair. It is the Omega, I think it's black or whatever, standard chair. It's actually incredibly comfortable. This is totally unsponsored. I'm just sharing. I love the chair.
Sponsor us, Secret
I'm
Lab.
really looking for a new one. I'm hoping it lasts. I have a 5-year warranty on it through doing their social media posting thing and some other stuff like that. So super happy with the chair over the past couple days. It comes with a lumbar pillow thing, which I have behind me to make sure I stand up or sit up rather a little bit straighter. And it has a backrest pillow, and it can recline all the way down, which makes it a wonderful place to rest.
I saw it. It's true.
Yes, it is true, and it is nice. And this was totally unsponsored. I'm just sharing my thoughts on Secret Lab. Biggest thing is the chairs are pretty pricey, about $300 to $500 depending on the chair you want. What I've been playing has been mostly City Skylines since last week when I could. Just a couple hours. I was really busy renovating the office that I'm in, as well as helping move a friend and some other stuff like that. So I had a really busy week. So I have played a little bit. Poopopolis is doing great. It is now over 100,000 strong, but we're going for big numbers. So gonna keep working on that.
Did you name it Poopopolis?
I did name it Poopopolis.
Yes.
Thank you. Because my plan at the end of the game, when I'm all right, I don't want to play this game anymore, is to create a super volcano that I put all the sewage into to make a poop volcano, which then proceeds to flood my city. So that is the intention at the end of my playthrough to do that.
These people knew what they signed up
Oh,
for.
yeah.
They knew the town was named Poopopolis.
Who goes to a town called Poopopolis? That's
Honey, Poopopolis sounds like a fine place to settle down. Let's raise the kids here.
And for those that haven't played City Skylines, it came out right as Twitter was like really becoming the big thing. So they have effectively tweets at the top from, your residents that you can read. And it's hilarious to me when people are like, Poopopolis is such a wonderful city. I'm like, you wrote Poopopolis in a tweet, you idiot. So it's been a lot of fun. In terms of what I'm drinking, I have a Yingling Golden Pilsner again, as well as some water. I have not had time to purchase other beer, really. And I have quite a few of these still left because I had bought a college level 24 pack. So still working my way through.
Bruh.
Yeah. Still working my way through all those. I will also share, for my birthday, I also received another wonderful gift, probably from one of our listeners. I'll say Dave, because I'll just leave it as that, because people here will know who that is. Thank you, Dave. I got It Takes Two from him, and we've talked about it on the podcast that, I need to play it. So I need to figure out who wants to play that. Maybe Dave wants to play it. Who knows? So super excited to play that game because I really enjoyed A Way Out, which was by the same exact developers and publishers, I think is the same. So really excited to play that as well.
It's a lot of fun. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Awesome.
Way different from A Way Out, but it's still
Hopefully
a
not
great
as
cooperative
emotional because I was a little bit broken up at the end of A Way Out. I'll tell you that.
I think it's emotional in a different
Exactly,
way.
yeah.
Oh, God. It's going to be like Toy Story because that's kind of how it looked to me. It looked like Toy Story. And I will not lie. I got upset at the end of Toy Story 4. So not cried, just got upset.
I don't
Anyway,
wanna spoil
enough
it for
about
you.
me. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Enough about me. Tom, how are you doing? How is Crusader Kings going? And what else are you playing?
I'm good. Work's been real busy, but today is the day that it kind of started to lighten up, which is really nice. So I'm riding that wave of positivity off of that. I'm drinking a Bang Blue Raz energy drink, which has become a little bit of my standard. But I had a Bang Fruit Punch energy drink earlier, so I should be hopped up on goofballs for this podcast. Crusader Kings is indeed the game I've been playing, and basically the only game I've been playing, because what other games do you need when you have a game that combines the power of Crusaders and Kings? I'm trying to think of any real high moments I've had there. I seized the final holy site for my religion of Space Jesus, and mended the Great Schism to make that the one and only true Christianity. So the Pope will hopefully stop waging holy wars on me like a jerk.
Oh,
By the way, I own all of the papal lands and made sure he had no land whatsoever and that Catholicism was 3 states left or whatever. He's still calling holy wars on me, and 20 people are coming to march on my territory. And there's a bug with the latest update to the game where your garrisons don't refill. So I have all of these garrisons with 0 people that get conquered in a siege in 2 days, as does everyone else. But it enables these armies of 20 guys named Steve to come march down and take over my capital in 2 days. So it's not fun from that perspective. But it's really interesting on the other side of invading people and being able to take over in 10 seconds. So I started waging my first real war against the Byzantines, and I'm taking all kinds of land from them, which is very satisfying because they started as kind of the preeminent power in the game, and beating the ever-loving crap out of them is just amazing.
who's in charge now?
Oh,
It's you.
Pope Aberflus III is in charge now.
Brofloos.
I think that's one of the main names. I have a Welsh background, so it's Conflad and Finflif and Flafflif third.
Oh,
So
Yes.
rolls
Yes.
right
Can
off
you
the
spell
tongue.
that for me?
F's, W's, and Y's everywhere. It's just
And a silent Q.
Yes,
Of course.
if only. But yeah, it's been a ton of fun, and honestly, I don't get a whole lot of this from it, but there is a little bit of like an educational component of Crusader Kings where I get to learn a little bit about a time that I would say a lot of people don't get taught a whole lot about in high school. And I'm using that as a springboard because our topic tonight is actually about educational games. But no, I really do. I read like the Reddit about Crusader Kings, and a lot of people actually talk about the history. But the history I want to talk about is our history growing up as younger children, perhaps even younger than our golden age eras of playing Super Nintendos and N64s and Sega Genesis, and back to the days where you were still learning what a 5 plus 5 equaled or what a 2 plus 3 made 8. Except it doesn't, it makes 5, you foolish child. So all of these educational games we had back in the day, I think the number one everyone kind of falls into is Oregon Trail, but there were so many more that I can think of as a kid that still kind of just haunt my brain. I still think about like one game in particular called Scooter's Magic Castle, which I swear I don't remember much of at all, but the entire game was built around like this wizard, and you had different sort of like point and click tools, almost like a Sierra game, to interact with your environment. And then there are different mini games that you could participate in the castle. And I think they all touched on different things, like there's numbers, colors, words. I think a lot of like the common thread of these games was trying to have that different experience in each sort of little mini game. So there are some that are more focused, but Scooter was really like all over the place as far as I remember. But it was just, I don't know, I think something about like the little happy wizard with his giant crazy elf face and his backwards hat with stars and moons on it really just kind of stuck out to me for whatever reason. Even though I feel like a lot of the gameplay has kind of passed me by. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of bring that up, and I have a whole bunch of other games in mind, but I wanted to see what some of the other games that you guys remember from your earliest childhood learning experiences are.
We are a lucky group of people, I think, in the sense that we were old enough to often have a computer at our house, you know, if you were in a more well-to-do family. But we weren't at a time where computers were like everywhere in a classroom when we were really young. It happened right around when we were, let's just say, second, third grade. So I guess that would make us like 8 or so. So I already had quite a bit of familiarity with computers by the time a lot of other people were just starting to learn to use them. And we also were lucky in the sense that schools, as they got those computers, wanted to have computer classes. My first memory, and just so like we know, in case you guys don't know, computer classes are still taught today, like in your elementary and your middle school. Everyone needs to know them. But we were in an age where like we were already kind of good with them. If you were, again, in a more well-to-do family and had one at home. So like the typing stuff, the things like that were very easy to do. But they weren't at the point where like people could do their own like learning to code and stuff, where now that's very popular in the younger ages. So a lot of our time was playing games too. So like once you got done the typing stuff, you could play games. And I remember 2 in particular, which kind of sprangboard my business mindset, called Ice Cream Chuck, and then later on Hot Dog Stand, which I don't know if you guys ever played those. And I wouldn't call them educational from I learned a lot, aside from the fact that I'll take Ice Cream Chuck because that was probably the more popular one that at least I remember, as well as it had a few extra features that I personally preferred. So for example, if it was a hot day, you'd want to go to the park and sell more ice cream, and you want to make sure you're stocked up enough. And if you overstocked, you could lose ice cream. So you had to like kind of think about how many people might be there. And like it mattered if it was a Saturday or a Sunday, because then the kids would be at the park versus the school. So you wouldn't want to go to the school on a weekend. So I really liked that because it was kind of a little bit of that basic business mindset of like, okay, where are my customers? How much product do I need to order? How do I balance my books? And I think there was even a loan that you started with. So like that game was really cool.
Capitalism light.
Yeah, it was to teach you. It was to teach you a bit like starting a business.
Yeah.
You know, and it was about ice cream, which was awesome. You know, and you got to spend 20 of the 40 minutes or whatever it was playing that. So those two games for me in the younger years were by far my favorite. I know we played a lot of other ones where it was like math problems and stuff like that we did on the computer, because the computer could do some cool like animations or whatever. But the ones I predominantly remember are like typing games, like word kind of games. I think we did a little bit of crossword kind of things as well on the computer, because it could generate crossword puzzles for you. And then, like I said, hot dog truck and ice cream stand.
And, I think you brought up like an interesting idea too, which is when did you get that exposure to a computer and where? Because it really was a different era when we were kids. Not everyone had a computer
Right.
at home. And I know for us, at least, I think in school, our first exposure to a computer was around first grade, which was pretty cool. But we had, I didn't go to a wealthy school or anything, very small public school. We had like Apple II machines, and I remember playing Turtle on them, which is a very common kind of programming thing. And I remember some of the kids figured out like hacky features of it. So let me back up a little bit. For those of you who aren't familiar with what Turtle is, because it's no longer 1985, it's basically just a triangle on a blank screen. And you have to tell the turtle, which is the triangle, which way to move. And as it moves, it draws a line behind it, which we thought of kind of as a poop trail. Because
Of course.
guess what? It's a poop
You were
trail.
5.
Yeah. What you would do, because this was the very early 90s, is you would take like an overhead projector screen that would have lines printed on it like a maze, and you would put that on top of the computer screen and try to navigate the turtle through the maze without breaking any of the lines, stuff like that. But there were some people that knew how to kind of like use extra commands like you would in like Computer Basic to change the color of the lines or the thickness of the lines and stuff like that. Those were the kids that kind of had like the leg up at home kind of deal, I think. But I think that's part of what got me interested in like programming at an early age, was just seeing that sort of thing happen. But that was, my first exposure. And I think Scooter's Magic Castle sticks out to me because that was first grade. And I remember playing that sort of game. But my first exposure to computers and sort of the educational game genre was my grandfather, actually, who had a DOS computer. And whenever we would go visit them in New York, we would play on there, and he had a ton of games on there. So Rita Rabbit was one that me and my cousin played, and then I'll get to the next one in a little bit, but I want to let Megan share a little bit if she has a shareable first.
I mean, as far as educational games, it wasn't like a super big thing in my life. I was fortunate enough to have a computer at home. I think when I was 7 or 8, my parents bought a Gateway computer.
That was the big one.
Hey, yeah.
Yeah.
With the cow spots.
Exactly, yep. So like any games that we would play on the computer, it was mostly for fun, or they would be like art games or whatever that my parents would get because I was super into drawing and sketching and things like that. I joked before this that the only educational game that I played, and it's not a game, was Encarta 95, where you could play with the encyclopedia on your computer, and I would like look up things and read about it. School, probably we didn't have computers until I hit the 8th grade. Like I remember learning
Really?
how
Wow.
to type on a typewriter. In like the 6th and 7th grade, that's how we did everything. They were very very low in numbers as far as computers in the school. Like I played Oregon Trail. I did do that in like the 4th or 5th grade. But it was like maybe for 20 minutes the entire time I was in the 5th grade. But yeah, we didn't have computers really growing up while I was in school. It was our middle school transferred to what was our old high school, and we kind of got a lot of the old equipment from the high school. So then we kind of had computers where we could learn typing and do things. But the only games I remember playing would be, I think it was Mario's Game Gallery, which was like backgammon, Yahtzee, Go Fish. There was nothing educational whatsoever. So I feel like I kind of missed out.
Well, so I Okay, you may not have, Megan, so I'm not trying to put this one necessarily on you, but I also feel like a lot of games back then were much more historical based. So, like, I remember playing Age of Empires 2, and forgive me, I forget exactly the year it came out, but let's just say we were about 9 years old, somewhere around there, like mid to late 90s, somewhere in there. I think it actually had a 20 something anniversary recently. I remember playing that, and the campaigns in that were based on actual people. So there was
Right.
an Attila the Hun campaign. I remember there was Walter Wallace or whoever campaign. There's other ones. Forgive me. I remember the Attila the Hun one the
William
best.
Wallace?
I don't remember honestly.
Braveheart.
Sure, yeah, why not? I don't remember, but I just remember that there was like those. I think Alexander the Great may have been one as well, and at least one of the Age of Empires. But what was interesting is like they would have like in Age of Empires 2 especially, they would have like movies after, and like it'd be like a narrator telling you the history side of it before you would like play the battle or whatever. I know one was also Joan of Arc as well, now that I think about it. They would use words that like I picked up based on the images they were showing. So one of them was, and I'll never forget this my whole life, one of them, I feel like it was Alexander the Great, but whoever it was had razed a city to the ground, and they showed like a burning city. That's the first time I ever had heard the word raised, to my
Raised.
knowledge. Yeah. I used it in something about Alexander the Great that I wrote. And my dad did proofread it, but I know for a fact that I used the word raised in it. And I remember my teacher, circling the word and putting off to the side, is this your word or whatever, assuming that I was like effectively
You did,
plagiarizing it. And like I got so upset reading that from her because I was like, no, I learned that word from
Yeah.
playing a game where it was in. And like I know that Age of Empires is not considered educational, and I feel like a lot of games have lost their campaign, part of it where they go through some history. But even today, the games that are more historical based, which are my favorite,
Yeah.
I still imagine someone who is not as familiar with World War II, with World War One, with other kinds of conflict or any kind of historical thing, learning something, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
It's the way people are like. I think a lot of my history passion came from playing games like that. So
Yeah.
I mean, I feel the same way. I mean,
Yeah.
I definitely, I mean, I knew nothing about, 300s-ish era AD China before playing Dynasty Warriors and whatnot. And then a lot of my friends happened to be really into it and like took up learning like the characters and the actual history of what happened at that time. And like that's a cool way to learn a new subject.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't joking when I said like Crusader Kings has taught me new things about like the ruling nations and peoples of that time.
Oh, sure.
I've known some of it, but I really feel like that sort of era of history is not very well taught in the American public school system, at least. Even in college, I took a Western Civ to 1600 course and didn't. We kind of glossed over that era in time. It was like, yeah, okay, Charlemagne happened, and we're moving on. It's like, okay.
I feel like a lot of schools do that stuff
Yeah.
though. They want to briefly cover like everything, but then especially like post Civil War, they don't cover very well at all. I know my European history especially, you just don't hear a lot about any of that. And like there's a huge change in Europe from 1860 to 1960. So
I mean, it makes it so hard to understand like the causes for World War One and Two without knowing all that stuff.
Absolutely.
And you really learn much more about it because just like there's so many states that ended up comprising Germany and the Holy Roman Empire and all this sort of stuff.
yeah, and a lot of people
That's what
don't
it is.
understand the formation of Germany as a
Yeah.
country. Unless you're from Europe, you're probably a little more familiar. But us Americans, we are totally like oblivious to like, oh, World War One happened and then Nazis happened, but why did Nazis happen? And I think it's important to know that. And a lot of people know, oh, they were terrible, and they are, but they don't know why they came about, and it's really unfortunate. And that's why I'm really sad to see like RTS games starting to die in some ways. So like I know there's some like Company of Heroes who have tried to like change up the style of game versus like a StarCraft or an Age of Empires, but you're seeing, I think, a lot of like that historical campaign side starting to die away because that's not important to the people that are making the games anymore. And it's really sad. I would love to see more of those kind of still stick around, that more while we're trying to be fun and, everything, and even have a good multiplayer like Age of Empires 2, a lot of people still play it. I hope that the campaigns for like Age of Empires 4 when it comes out still matter. It's not just a mass multiplayer kind of game.
Well, we used to get more of that out of like the old sort of Medal of Honor, Call of Duty games before they became the Modern Warfare kind of thing.
Yep, absolutely. A good comparison.
Yeah. Shoot, I had another one that really kind of sprang to mind with that too. Oh, Civilization taught me all kinds of things about history before I got there, because I mean, I didn't know anything about Japanese culture before 7th grade. People don't, you don't get taught that in the school system. But I used to like playing as like Tokugawa, or I had a friend who liked playing as India, so we found out about like Gandhi and learned stuff about
how he loves to nuke people, right?
Yeah. we were too young to realize that was a thing that happened in that game. But Civilization 2 really had more of a focus on actual history, which is pretty cool in my opinion. It also let you go to the moon if you had the right expansion, which was pretty cool.
Civilization 2 also the last one that they had those kind of custom pre-made maps? So I remember in Civilization 2, you could play effectively a pre-built scenario of World War II. You could choose your country. And it was like in that. Was that the last one that did that?
You could do that in 3.
In 3 as well?
I'm not sure if... I want to say 4 has that too.
5 doesn't though, right?
I don't know. It might have it as DLC, if nothing else,
maybe.
Because that was kind of like a mainstay. Or as mods. I mean, there's mods for...
That's true.
There's a bajillion mods in that game. I love the history aspect of those games. Like, please make more games like that. Like, it's fine to have a game that has a multiplayer mode that's Call of Duty Shoot-A-Man. That's fine. Make your story matter, if nothing else. And if you can have a historical context to it that teaches actual history and is fun and cool and gets kids excited about that kind of thing, that's awesome. Do that. Like, there's no reason not to.
Yeah.
Well, I think I've mentioned it before. So, like, Shadows of Mordor that I played recently, I would love to see a World War II version of that where you were like a special agent. Cool. So it's, you're a Russian sniper and your job is to snipe, officers, or in the Battle of Stalingrad, for example, and you're having to jump over rooftops, like dodging that kind of stuff, or other games like that, that like would put you in that space to like really feel things, but also give, you as the player some kind of unique experience, because obviously war is hell and you wouldn't want to be in an actual World War II battle. But I think that it'd be good to put people in to, even if you have to suspend your disbelief, like, oh, that didn't really actually happen in that way, you get to experience something that actually happened. And I think that's important. So like I've always been, I know this was educational games. I always learned history from my educational games. So that's why I'm leaning towards that. Versus other kinds of educational for like younger kids, like learning to type or learning to do other things with a computer. But I just think that the historical games mattered, and I feel like a lot of people just given up on that piece of it.
I feel like even like you've talked about Titanic Adventure Out of Time, and we've kind of like joked about it a little bit, but there's so much history you can learn even from an alternative history game like that. That has kind of gone a little bit more by the wayside.
I will point out that game came out in 95, maybe 96, but I'm pretty sure it was like completely independent of the movie that everyone knows that came out in 97. And it is a little bit alternate history.
I'm sure it had nothing to do with that. I'm sure it had absolutely nothing.
Well,
to do
in terms of publicity around the ship as a whole, but I don't know if there was any, like, it's so long ago. I just remember somehow getting a copy of the game and playing the hell out of it, and it was an awesome game. I've said before, my favorite time period is 1865, end of Civil War, to 1920 or so. I think it was a massive change in the human experience and civilization. That game puts you right in the middle of it and like shows how like one thing can change kind of how things went. So
and I mean, I think it's funny because I think that's why I like Crusader Kings so much, is because I think the period before 1600 is probably the period I'm most interested in. So I really like playing alternative histories with that in that game, and same with Civilization. But I think, we've talked about history, and I think a period that we have all experienced and dabbled in is learning about the American West from the Oregon Trail.
Oh, of course.
Please don't tell me I'm wrong.
Tom has died of dysentery.
I was going to say I learned many diseases that you can acquire.
Yeah.
And illnesses.
I mean, it's a meme at this point, but every kid that ever played Oregon Trail learned what dysentery was playing that game.
I think if I remember right, I read that and I was sitting in a computer class and it came up, whatever. I think it was Bob. Let's just say Bob. Bob has died of dysentery, and I look over at my friend. I'm like, what the hell is dysentery? I don't know if I said hell, and he responds.
Yeah, you said that as a kid.
Shoot and poop. And I'm like, what?
Shoot and poop.
He said you poop a lot, and I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, fun game.
But yeah, obviously there's, it's not a historical account of anything by any means, but it also gave you, as much as it could at that time, the immersive experience of trekking out and living that sort of life, which made it interesting to kids who are otherwise kind of like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
When you hit places, when you hit certain places, it would like pop up a little card, info card about that place. So like one of them, it was some kind of Indian trailhead, I think it was, and it was said something like this was maybe it was like the Black Hills, I don't know, but it was something like this is a area that was a religious place for Native Americans, of that area or something, and the trail. The people going west would find this area as like a point that put them 3 days out from the next fort or whatever. So, I think you learned some stuff, and if you were passionate about the time period, great. But I don't know.
My first encounter with resource management.
Oh yeah,
probably one of the first.
That's a great point.
Yeah, you needed to have enough food and supplies if you broke an axle or.
Mm-hmm.
You totally had to budget your money and make sure that you had enough.
Do you remember how you could be like different? I don't know if Oregon Trail 1, they've made a number of them over the years, but was the first one where you could be like the banker, which had the most money, but you could also be like other things too. I just remember I always chose banker.
I don't
was
know.
That one?
I don't remember if there were roles in the first one. I think so.
I definitely remember picking I remember the banker as well.
Yes.
That's the role that I remember.
I think there was the hunter or something where you would get more food from the animals you killed as well, but
yes,
I may be making these things up as I go redeveloping the game.
No,
Here's
I
how
mean
it should have gone.
There's a weird little message there too about sustainability in the hunting, because you could only ever bring back so much food.
So why shoot?
And, yeah, and you had limited ammo.
Mm-hmm.
You had to conserve your ammunition as well. So, yeah, I never put two and two together in the resource management in my head, but that totally teaches you that very important aspect of life.
I feel like if you had more ox, you could also move faster. But
I think so.
Something
like if you had
that,
too few, you would go slower or something as well. The problem is that, like I said, I think they've made like 6 of them, if not more, knockoffs or whatever. But there was a lot of those.
I wanted to bring up too, because I have strong memories of this, but I feel like no one else does. There was like a 90s Windows 95 game called the Yukon Trail, which was a more colorized, modern version of the Oregon Trail.
I remember it, yeah.
Yeah, you played that one?
If I did, I don't remember that one like I do Oregon.
I don't remember it now.
They had it at my daycare. So I talked about, how I had exposure to these sorts of games from like being a kid at my grandpa's house or from being in school. But my daycare also had 3 Windows 95 computers that had a handful of games. One of them was Cold Shadow, which is how I played that. That's the Donald Duck Ninja game. And, pinball games, Yukon Trail. And then there was also SimCity 2000. There was one computer that had SimCity 2000, which everyone wanted to play because SimCity 2000 is the best.
It was the first time you heard reticulating splines, right?
Do they reticulate the splines to open
in
that
2000 they do. I don't know if they did in the first one offhand, but I know they did in 2000.
That's awesome. But yeah, Yukon Trail, it was a lot kind of prettier than the original Oregon Trail. You had that depth of color, and you got to pick, again, from the different characters. The banker, I think, was also a mainstay in that game. But you had some, I think, educational games around like panning for gold and stuff like that, because the ultimate goal of this game was to go pan for gold and make your fortune there.
Was that the game where you actually made it there and you were having to collect gold and then buy stuff from the shops that were overpriced?
Think so.
Because I remember a game like
so.
that, and maybe it was Yukon Trail. Huh.
And you had to hire a trail guide too in this one, which I don't think you had to do in Oregon Trail. No. But you had to kind of carefully select who you wanted to bring with you. You had to pick.
I played it
you were
definitely.
Bring with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it was kind of a different experience, and if you've played Oregon Trail and not Yukon Trail, give it a go. I'm sure it's out there on like archive.org.
Remember when Facebook was making games and they came out with their own version of Oregon Trail, or somebody posted like a mod of it? Did you guys ever play that one? It was like 10 years ago, maybe. Yeah, Facebook was trying to get into the gaming scene with like Farmville and stuff like that. And there was Words with Friends, I think, was another one. They came out with an Oregon Trail version. I don't know if it was like by the makers of it or whatever.
Yeah.
And they came out with one, and I remember playing that a little bit. And like I said, it was about 10 years ago now.
Uh-huh.
It didn't do very well, I think.
What I remember is trying to find a version of Oregon Trail in college online, and this is 10 years ago now, and instead finding a fan-made version that was a road trip, and you had to manage CDs and snacks and make sure that you could get to wherever it was you were going on time, which was pretty cool. I haven't found it since.
There's also,
it just sounds pretty cool.
What is it recently? Oregon Trail, which is like you're traveling during a zombie apocalypse.
That's pretty cool.
You face like scavengers and zombies, and yeah.
Sounds awesome. I'd play it.
Megan, I'm not surprised that that's the version of Oregon Trail that you found. So I have at least one other game that I just wanted to bring up before we brought this to conclusion. Actually, two. So I already talked about my daycare, and the other game that I really remember from daycare was a Spider-Man comic making game.
Oh.
Or actually, it was movie making game. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it had it would give you had a range of scenes that you could set up and a range of characters, and they all had kind of like a walking animation and other stuff. So you just kind of drag them around the screen and they would walk, and you would record, whatever happens. So you could set up a balcony and then drag Spider-Man around. And he just struts, from side to side, and then you could have another Spider-Man drop from the ceiling, or you could have Venom come in or whatever. My favorite thing was they had Aunt May, who's the sweet old lady, and her animation was just her walking around like a feeble old lady. But you could put 57 different Aunt Mays just walking all over the screen. And oh my god, it's so funny.
Not that you know
I'm
from
gonna have to
experience.
look. I know very well from experience. But yeah, and you could put in speech bubbles and have them say different stuff, and just kind of create your own Spider-Man comic book fantasy.
Huh.
And as a kid who was totally into superheroes and Spider-Man, that was kind of my jam as a creative outlet. I am gonna have to see if I can find that. The other one that we had at daycare was NFL math. So solve math problems, score touchdowns.
That sounds pretty cool too.
It was pretty cool for what it was. And I think it was DOS based, so not a whole lot of colors. You were solving problems, and you just had to pick your football play. And I knew nothing about what football plays were when I was a kid, so it was kind of hey, always pick either draw play or sweep, and you'll win. And indeed you did, as long as you could do your math. So that really convinced me to do my math and score the touchdowns.
I do have one game, and it was kind of a betrayal. I was talked into buying Mario is Missing, I think we talked about this briefly an episode or two ago. But you played as Luigi, who was in search of Mario. And it was kind of an educational game where you would be transported to different cities and places. And you would have to find out where you were based on, like, context clues. And you would also have to find, like, what kind of artifacts were missing from the area. From what I remember, I didn't get super hyped about it. I never finished it. It wasn't my jam at all. But it was the ultimate betrayal.
Did it play similar to like Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
I
ask.
never played Carmen. Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? But it was like a point and click adventure.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it'd be that one. I think was more text based. Tom, I haven't played. I mean, that's, like I said,
Mario
it's been
is
25
missing?
years. Well, either one of
Oh,
these.
yeah.
I may have played Carmen a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I think that was more text based.
Right.
Exploring.
That sounds right to me. That actually just triggered like a childhood memory of. Did you guys ever play the DuckTales game?
No.
There was a DuckTales DOS game which actually taught me a great deal about geography. Because even though it was it was a platformer with a little action on a grappling hook, but you had to go to different spots in the world to go to different temples or find treasure somewhere, or do different stuff, which is not educational in and of itself. But when you're 4 and you have no idea what a New Zealand is,
What a New
so
Zealand
you learn
is.
stuff. Yeah, exactly. So I mean that was pretty cool. But there's one game that sticks out among all others for me, which you may or may not be familiar with, and it was called Dr. Quandary.
No.
And the premise of this game was that you were like a child playing at a carnival that gets sucked into the soul of a doll on an abandoned island full of mini games, which are all educational in nature. So there's a lot of like puzzle solving, kind of like putting geometry together to match shapes. There was a math guy that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me all the time. His game was playing in multiples, and when you're 4, it doesn't make a lot of sense. There was, kind of a memory game where you have to remember colors going into like a cup at the right time, kind of thing. Just different stuff like that. And the way it was put together was just really fun. In the way that learning those sorts of things was not boring or disinteresting. It was really put together in a way that made you want to continue to engage with the game, and every little aspect of it was very different, which was just cool. Like, I hope that the educational games of today are still working in such quirky ways and giving out the same amount of knowledge in a fun way, and that they're not just becoming these ham-fisted, math blasters or whatever they are today.
So the only thing I'd say, Tom, is I think that from my perspective, there probably are still some educational games. I'm afraid that kids aren't as interested in them.
Yeah.
But I know that
My children will play them all.
But I know, to that point though, I know that there are I'll call them educational games in that the VR space is super interesting for educational games. So there are actually games being developed, games we'll call them, which are more like simulator based. So like, obviously as a doctor, you can't practice, or as a surgeon rather, you can't practice on bodies as easily. You can do it on dead bodies, but it's not quite the same as like being able to like really do a ton of stuff. So they've actually made games for like surgeons to learn off of, and they're getting better like every day. And that's just one example, but I know that that's something super interesting that's kind of coming around now. So it's not really a game that like the masses would play, but they're trying to utilize the virtual and reality space to kind of do that, kind of put people into those situations. And I know that the Army back in 2000 had America's Army, which was a public game that they actually put out. But America's Army was a popular game for the Army, trying to experiment with the idea of putting their soldiers into other ways to kind of work together and everything. So that was something I've seen before, and I'm sure that they have some games that are more classified for pilots and other people to practice and to learn off of, to not put themselves in, potentially bad situations.
I've heard they look for good gamers to be the drone pilots. I've heard some of them are flown just with an Xbox controller. Mm-hmm. So,
listen,
yeah.
I've played Surgeon Simulator, and I know if I hit a guy hard enough in the head, his eyes will pop out, and I can do proper eye surgery.
Don't think that's how they do it, but okay.
I was gonna say things have come a long way since playing Operation as a kid. But,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I think they're still out there. I just think that they've become a little more specialized.
Yeah.
And
the general public doesn't see it.
Yeah, the general public isn't seeing it quite as much. But I think that people that are interested still in those spaces can find those games. They just have to go looking for them. To what I said earlier, don't look for the straight up, this is an educational game. It's classified as educational in the Steam library. Look for the games that are interesting to you in that that time period, for example, from a historical perspective, that has a good campaign that will teach you something.
Yeah.
I gotta imagine there's some good games for the kids out there too.
I'm sure
I have no idea because I'm not a parent. But
yeah, same. So I have no idea, but I'm sure there are.
Yeah. Great. Well, do you guys have anything else for today's topic? Otherwise, I think we've educated the masses on educational games quite well enough.
I'm good.
All right.
I'm good as well.
Thank you, guys. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and doing all of the fun things to tell us that you love us. Leave a review. Tell us that you love us. Tell us that you don't love us. And check us out on all of our social media channels on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at JoyPad Pod, on YouTube at JoyPad, and actually on the recently provisioned joypadpod.com. La la. Come and find us and let us know what you think.
Does it have anything on there yet, Tom?
Who knows?
It redirects to the Anchor FM landing page.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So it'll show you all of our episodes if you're interested in hearing more. If you would like to leave us any feedback, you can do so at any of those socials or at joypadpod@gmail.com. And I think that's about it. So, without further ado, I can tell myself to take us take us out.
Man.
So, 1, 2, 3, listen to me. Make sure to educate yourself and stay joyful.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.